3 million pages of evidence, thousands of unsealed flight logs, millions of data points, names, themes, and timelines connected. You are listening to the Epstein Files, the world's first AI-native investigation into the case that traditional journalism simply could not handle.
Welcome back to the Epstein Files. Last time we walked through Little St. James Island and tested what the records could actually prove without speculation. Today, we are examining the Manhattan Mansion and mapping what the documents show about actors, timeline, decisions, and institutional response. As always, every document and source we reference is available at epsteinfiles.fm. So, the first record is a 1989 property deed showing Les Wexner purchased 9 East 71st Street for $13.2 million, and we need to trace what happened to that property next.
Right, that deed is the anchor for everything else. And just like with the island, we need to be clear on the rules. We're stripping away all the rumors, all the descriptions of the architecture.
Doing a forensic audit.
Exactly. We are only looking at property deeds, financial transfers, and federal raid inventories. If we don't have a deposition or a police log for it, we're not going to speculate on what happened behind those doors. We start with the asset itself.
9 East 71st Street. And this isn't just another building. I mean, even in Manhattan, this place is unique.
Yeah.
It's cited over and over as the largest private residence in the city.
It's a massive footprint, 7 stories. But the key thing for our purposes, the thing that shows up in the records, is the chain of custody. It gets strained.
Okay, so Les Wexner buys it in 1989. That's clear.
Yes. The Les Wexner assorted documents, the property deeds from that time, they clearly establish his ownership. For more than 2 decades, it's a Wexner asset. But the timeline shifts, and that's when the forensic alarm bells go off. It's the transfer of that deed.
And this happened in 2011. And let's just pause on that date because context is...
Everything.
It's everything. By 2011, Jeffrey Epstein is not some respected financier. He's 3 years past his Florida plea deal. He is a registered sex offender.
He is, for all intents and purposes, socially radioactive.
And yet, that's when the property records show this massive asset gets transferred from Wexner to Epstein.
And this is where we have to dig into the numbers, because the math simply does not reconcile. We've gone through the Epstein Assets Files, the Wexner Foundation report. At the time of this transfer, the market valuation for 9 East 71st Street was estimated at roughly $77 million.
$77 million for a single house.
It's a staggering sum. And in any normal transaction, you would expect to see a deed reflecting a payment somewhere close to that value, or at least a mortgage recorded against the property.
But the deed doesn't show a $77 million payment, right?
No. The transfer was recorded for $0. Some abstracts say $10. It was basically a nominal fee.
Okay, let's just break this down. You have the $77 million asset moving from a billionaire to a convicted felon for essentially nothing. Do we find any commercial explanation for this? A mortgage satisfaction, an exchange of other assets, anything in the Wexner assorted documents?
That's the first place we looked. In contract law, you look for consideration and exchange of value. We audited all the available files, including that Wexner Foundation report from their own internal review.
Yeah.
We don't have documentation for a commercial justification for this transfer. There is no public record of a $77 million counterpayment.
So forensically, what do you call it if there's no payment?
Based on the records, it appears to be a gift, or a transfer without consideration. And this establishes a critical baseline for the whole story. Epstein's base of operations in New York, this huge 7-story building, it was acquired through a non-market transaction. He didn't buy it. It was granted to him.
Which means the venue for everything that allegedly happened next was provided to him after his first conviction. That's the location.
Right.
Now let's move to the interior. Again, we have to be disciplined here. Ignore the tabloids. We're looking at the deposition of Johannes Joberg from 2016 and the Ghislaine Maxwell deposition.
This Joberg deposition is really the primary source. She testified under oath, describing the specific layout of the house, how she entered, the staff, the arrangement of the upper floors.
What's striking about her testimony is how clinical it is. It's not a haunted house story. It's a description of a functioning residence. But she does mention specific furniture.
Specifically, massage tables. And this isn't just a vague memory. She gives a specific detail about the furniture and rooms that were supposed to be living quarters. You combine that with the Ghislaine Maxwell deposition, which confirms Maxwell's presence and, comfort at the property, and a picture starts to form.
It wasn't just his home. It was a facility.
It was a venue. And there was also physical evidence found inside that anchors the whole network of actors to that specific place. The contact directory.
Epstein's little black book.
Yeah.
We hear that name all the time. But was it actually found in the mansion?
It was. The unredacted version is part of the evidence. Federal agents located and secured it inside that property. So this isn't just some list floating around online. It's a physical artifact tied to this location. It connects the building to the people.
Okay, but on the layout, there are always these claims about hidden rooms, dungeons, reinforced doors. Does the Sjoberg testimony or maybe the affidavit of Maria Farmer back any of that up?
We have to be very precise. The Farmer affidavit and Sjoberg deposition describe a very specific, very controlling environment. They describe the rooms where the abuse happened. But regarding claims of a dungeon or some elaborate underground facility, we don't have documentation for that facility, not in the sworn testimony or in the raid summaries.
So the horror was happening out in the open. In the bedrooms, not some secret basement.
Based on the available records, yes. We have to stick to what's been documented.
Which brings us to the end of the timeline for the house itself, July 2019. Epstein is arrested, and the mansion is raided by the FBI. This is the moment the government takes control.
A crucial bureaucratic moment. The source we have to look at here is titled Epstein Files Nat Corey Stofflet. It gives a good retrospective on what actually happened during that raid.
So the FBI goes into 9 East 71st Street with a warrant. What did they take out?
According to the Stofflet source and the Epstein FBI report files, the inventory was significant. This wasn't just papers, it was raw evidence, hard drives, photos, videos, handwritten notes.
Hang on, videos. That's explicitly listed in the inventory.
It is. The Stofflet text refers to raw evidence, including videos and hard drives that went directly into the FBI's investigative holdings.
So that leads to the institutional custody part of this. Where did all that material, the hard drives, the tapes, where did it go?
Straight into the Department of Justice's case file. The Stofflet source calls these the purest Epstein files because they are primary source material, seized right from the scene. They haven't been filtered through a lawyer.
But this is where the gap appears. The public has never seen any of these videos, and there was a very specific update from the DOJ about what they claim is on them.
That's right. The Stofflet source points to an unsigned memo that the DOJ and FBI released. It claimed they had conducted an exhaustive review of all the Epstein evidence.
And their conclusion?
The memo declared there was no client list.
So let's look at that contradiction. On one side, you have a 2019 raid inventory that verifies the seizure of hard drives and videos. On the other, you have a later DOJ memo saying there's no client list on them.
It's a documented conflict, a conflict between the physical seizure of evidence and an institutional analysis of it. The hard drives exist. The inventory proves it. The DOJ's position is that those drives just don't contain a list that would warrant further unsealing. That's the bureaucratic wall.
Which brings us to the surveillance question. These rumors about the tapes have been around forever, but we have to ground this in the Jeffrey v. Maxwell filings. Specifically, the legal proceedings involving Sarah Ransom.
Sarah Ransom's allegations are central. In the Jeffrey v. Maxwell docket, there are filings about her deposition. She alleges the existence of, and I'm quoting, unhackable devices containing incriminating footage.
She claimed to have copies, or at least knew where they were.
She alleged there is video evidence implicating high-profile people, but you also have to look at the counter-argument in those same filings. The lawyer representing Alan Dershowitz argued her testimony was demonstrably false and wanted her emails declassified to challenge her credibility.
So you have one witness alleging a blackmail library exists on these devices, and you have legal filings where those claims are aggressively challenged. Exactly. So we have to apply the audit test. Do we have the tapes? No. We have testimony from Ransom saying they exist, and we have federal inventory records saying videos were seized from the mansion.
But not the content.
Right. As for the specific content, whether they show who Ransom claims they show, we don't have public documentation of the video content.
So we can't view the tapes to confirm, but we can confirm that the FBI took something they categorized as video from the very house where the filming was alleged to have taken place.
That is the forensic limit. We
Right.
have the container, the hard drives, but we don't have the data.
I want to zoom out to this synthesis you mentioned. The Stofflet source maps out where all these files actually live. We think of the Epstein files as one big box, but it's really 3 separate silos.
Understanding this bureaucracy is essential. It explains why the whole story feels so fragmented. The Stofflet text breaks it down perfectly. Silo 1 is the Treasury Department. That's the money.
Silo 2 is the FBI and DOJ. That's the physical evidence from the raid we just discussed. And Silo 3 is the federal courts. That's all the civil discovery, like the Stroberg deposition.
Let's stick with Silo 1 for a second, Treasury. How does that connect back to the Wexner transfer?
Because money leaves a trail. It's much harder to erase than a hard drive. The Stofflet source notes that banks, like J.P. Morgan, filed suspicious activity reports SARs for years. All those SARs went into a big Epstein file at the Treasury.
And a SAR, just for our listeners, is a suspicious activity report. A bank has to file one if a transaction looks like fraud or money laundering.
Correct. Most people never have one. Maybe one or two in a lifetime if something odd happens.
And Epstein.
The Stofflet source cites a Senate Finance Committee investigation. They finally got access to view this Treasury file, no copies allowed. They found that it documented 4,725 wire transfers.
4,725.
Totaling nearly $1.1 billion in and out of just one of Epstein's accounts.
It's massive. So while the debate is happening over the FBI's videos, which the DOJ says are nothing, there's a whole separate silo at Treasury with over $1 billion in suspicious flows.
Precisely. And the Stofflet text makes the point that the mansion was the intersection of all three silos. It was the physical location of the abuse from the court files. It was the repository for the potential blackmail material now in the FBI files. And it was the asset of questionable value that should have been flagged all over the Treasury file.
But the agencies aren't putting the pieces together for the public.
The Stofflet source really frames it as a political fight. The Senate Finance Committee was chasing the money at Treasury. The House Oversight Committee was subpoenaing the DOJ for the raid files. And then the DOJ just drops that unsigned memo saying, move along.
To sum up our look at 9 East 71st Street, then, we have a property that was acquired for essentially $0 from a billionaire. We have sworn testimony detailing the layout and the abuse inside. We have a federal raid that took out terabytes of digital data, including videos.
And we have a bureaucratic wall preventing the public from knowing what was on those drives. The Manhattan Mansion is the black box. We know what went in money, young women, powerful people. We know what came out of here, an FBI team with evidence bags. But the processing of that evidence appears to have stopped at the DOJ's door.
So while the deed and the raid are documented facts, the specific content of the seized hard drives from 9 East 71st Street remains the largest gap in the public record.
Which leaves us with the question from the Stofflet source. If the Treasury file documents 4,725 wire transfers worth over $1 billion, and the FBI has the video evidence from the safe, why does the entire investigation seem to dead end at an unsigned DOJ memo claiming there's no client list? What explains the gap between 4,725 suspicious transfers and nothing to see here?
That's time. Palm Beach Estate.
You have just heard an analysis of the official record. Every claim, name and date mentioned in this episode is backed by primary source documents. You can view the original files for yourself at epsteinfiles.fm. If you value this data-first approach to journalism, please leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening right now. It helps keep this investigation visible. We'll see you in the next file.